Lodge, Ordo Templi Orientis proudly presents Sarah Merrill on Will, a Twin Flames production. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Love is the law.
All right, now we say this sentence to each other day by day. Do we always really know what it means? Because there's some hidden meanings in just that simple sentence. And all those words are single syllables. So even a child could learn to say that. But as I look at various Thelemites and have gone through so many years of experience, I wonder if people really know what they're talking about when they say that. And some seems to me it takes a long while for it to sink in. And of course you have to know the book of the law quite well before lots more sinks in about it. So I decided that I would talk about will today because people get confused. What is my will? And this is, I guess, essential that you know what your will is. Now, there are two kinds of will, actually. There's a finite will, that could be your vocation or your avocation, what you want to do in this world. And then there's the infinite will, which carries on from life to life to life, over and over again. And that is to achieve the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. At least that's what we call it in Thelema. Other religions call it something else. But we don't need to go into the history of what religions have called it. But every human has the ability to transcend what they are here on this earth and to transcend whatever the horoscope has handed them for this particular life. And of course, from each life, you get a different kind of horoscope depending on what you need. I could talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to go stop wandering around and get back to the subject here. The infinite will is extremely difficult to achieve because Thelema means extreme self-discipline. To do what you will means extreme self-discipline. If, for instance, let's take the violinist who's going to play in a famous orchestra, or perhaps he's going to be a solo artist and work so that he can turn out things for our consumption on records and whatnot. He must discipline himself to practice so and so many hours every day. I choose a violinist because I noticed one in my past. I was living in the same house as the Kauf's house in Hollywood. And he must decide that he cannot stay up all night and party because tomorrow he must practice. And he must learn all kinds of music. It's not only the kind of music he's going to play, but he must discipline himself to decide to go to college and to learn the things that he needs to learn about music in general. And he must discipline himself to use his fingers and his violin carefully and all the rest of it. Therefore, he must give up smoking. He decides not to drink. He decides that certain foods do not go well with his particular occupation. And he decides all kinds of things like this in order to become a decent violinist. And if he's got the talent and disciplines himself sufficiently, he becomes famous. Now, of course, there's a saying that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% hard work. And I look around at some people who are interested in Thelema, and they say, oh, maybe somebody says, well, it's my will to ask you to do these things, therefore you've got to obey me. That's not Thelema. And that person is undisciplined. And that can lead to difficult things. And we only have to look at what happens in cases like the Jim Jones and whatnot, and the Woodrow stuff. Some of these people achieve a certain amount of illumination, and then they decide that everybody else has to obey them, and they make slaves of other people. Now, in Thelema, you don't need slaves. Each person is supposed to become a king. And if you are a slave to some habit, just think what you're doing to yourself. Are you a slave to cigarettes? Are you a slave to alcohol? Are you a slave to drugs? You're not going to get anywhere with Thelemic studies and Thelemic living if you are a slave in any sort of way. Of course, the Book of the Law says the slave shall serve, but who wants to be a slave? I hope not. Anyone in this room. And I think you're here because you want something better for yourselves, and you want to achieve some kind of illumination. And this is perhaps what has inspired you to become interested in Thelema to begin with. However, there's lots of different kinds of inspiration for this. Some people decide, well, I'm going to do magic because I can make the world do what I want them to do, other people to do what I want. You see, so I'll use magic. Okay, so I'll tell you a little story here. I won't give his name away because he's well known. Mr. X decided that he had a bad car. It was always going out of whack. And he needed to use it to get to work and so on. So Mr. X decided the car went out of whack on a weekend. And he decided, okay, I'm going to fix that with a ritual. And he went indoors and devised a ritual for Uranus. And went through it. And when he told me about this later, I said, for Pete's sake, Uranus does not rule cars. Mars does. And I said, not only that, but I think you're a little bit off beam. The best thing to do is to find out how to fix your own car. And I've seen too much of this. Oh, I'll do a ritual. And they forget the very basic stuff they ought to be doing. Something goes wrong in your life, you fix yourself. You learn how to fix anything that's going around. If something's going wrong in your house, you either earn enough money to get somebody else to fix it, or you do it yourself. You don't do a ritual for it. That's kind of upside down, you see. Now, what the rituals are for are to refine your own character and to help you gain some kind of knowledge of spiritual life, But I have seen folks take up Enochian, for instance, and they know nothing else. And they go nuts. Rigardi used to say, these people, he'd shake his head. They have no background, and they want to do Enochian this and Enochian that, and study it and evoke Enochian entities. Well, I'll tell you a nice little story about that. I was corresponding with a person who was doing just that. He was evoking Nyx, the king of the water. And in his house, things began to go wrong. First, the animals were all upset, and then his children were upset, and then his wife couldn't take it any longer because things were happening in the house that should not be there. And eventually, the cooling system, he lived in Arizona, warm country, and the cooling system in his house broke and couldn't be fixed. And the pipes into the house, the water pipes into the house broke. And then the radiator in his car broke. And he wrote to me about all this water trouble that he was having. I wrote back and I said, for Pete's sake, would you ask the President of the United States to come and do your dishes for you? He had evoked a king, so what did the king do? He sent persons to tell this guy that he was doing exactly the wrong thing. I mean, he sent entities. You do not want to handle any entity on the other side because it will get you if you can't take care of yourself. If you cannot discipline yourself, you will go nuts evoking something else. So anyway, the latest I heard from this person is giving up magic entirely. Nothing more. I just think it was lucky that the family didn't get into a boat and go out in the lake. They've lost everybody. And this all happened because he couldn't discipline himself. And I've heard of other incidents too. Early on, somebody wrote to Grady and me about what they had done. They had evoked something from the other side. And evocation can be very dangerous. He was a young man, and he thought, oh boy, let's have fun. That's what he really started out thinking. This is wonderful. I can just evoke something unusual and get it to do my bidding and intelligence or whatever. And he did this. He went through the rituals to evoke this entity. And soon his house began to go all to pieces. That the animals and his parents were away, fortunately. When the parents came back, they couldn't stand the atmosphere. So he had to try and get rid of whatever it was he had evoked. And he ended up having to ask a Catholic priest who knew about these things to help him get rid of it. He couldn't get rid of it by himself. He didn't know how to make it depart because he couldn't make some things in his own character depart. And so the Catholic priest did whatever ritual they happened to know about, and they took a certain thing that this fellow had put together for his evocation ceremony and wrapped it all up and then went out into the woods and buried the stuff. And eventually things got back to normal. So you have to be very careful. Do not fiddle with things on the other side. You cannot control your body. You cannot control your emotions. You cannot control your mind. You will soon be in trouble. And the only thing that really is important for you, Crowley puts it very, very succinctly, and as you can hear in practice. He said, any operation which has nothing to do with achieving the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel is black magic. And I bet you read that sentence and forgot about it. There is only one thing for anyone to do. It's to one point their will towards the achievement of the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. That's the only thing that's lawful, really. And so all of this glamour and what you think is fun is really off limits, especially if you're beginning. And you have to start at the beginning. You have to build a pyramid that has a very wide base. I have seen Jack Parsons, for instance, and Grady McMurtry were two of them. I have seen people who build with hardly any base. And they get something tall like this. So the first psychic wind that comes along, and Jack blew himself up, and Grady went into an insane asylum. Because they wouldn't do the beginning work. In fact, Grady used to come out and about 11 o'clock in the morning and do all of the rush at one time, even midnight. So that's how imbalanced people can be. All right, now, you start with the body. Why not? Because that's what you're in, right? You have to, this body is the temple of your soul. You have to take care of it. So then you have, if you really are serious about occult studies, you start to discipline the body. Again, that means that certain types of eating habits.
Ready, ready?
All right.
Yes.
I'll start over again. Discipline the body after it gets in.
Sorry.
That's all right.
It took a half hour longer than I was told it would.
Yes, right. You've never been here before.
No. Next time.
Yeah, right. Well, I was just talking about evoking things from the other side, entities of various sorts, and what kind of trouble you can get into. Because if you cannot discipline yourself, you cannot control yourself, you can't control anything. You can't even control this life and what happens to this life. Now, some of you have perhaps enough age to know this. Sometimes some people perhaps are too young to realize that they can get into pretty heavy trouble if they don't know what self-discipline means. And I've gotten to the point where we're talking about the pyramid, and that you, oh, what's that, Greg?
That's all right.
What's that, Greg?
What's that, Greg?
If it's Greg, I'm like 353.
Oh, stop again. Turn it off. That's great.
I know he's coming.
But Greg knows me well enough. He knows how I can scold.
I don't think he's been here before.
Oh, yeah, he might.
Yeah, Greg is.
What we could do, go,
Greg is
look the whole
awesome.
room. You'll look up.
Don't tell him I said
The camera's rolling. George, no. My wife said that. It's already taped. Too late.
Okay. I was talking about building the pyramid and how it has to be hard, and how Jack Parsons and Grady Mercury had no base of building it correctly. Therefore, they had a very narrow thing. They wanted to start at the top. You know, you've all heard the Babylon story about Jack Parsons, I'm sure. Well, I was in the same house for 3 months with Jack starting some of this stuff. Believe me, that place was horrible. For atmosphere, especially right up above his room. I took a complete stranger, sort of a relative of mine, visiting me, and I said, let's go up to the upper floor and see what you think about that. And we started up the steps, and she couldn't take it. She said, I can't go any further. She was sensitive enough to know something was wrong, extremely wrong. I used to try and go up there and clear it out with a vanishing ritual, but I was no match for what Jack had gotten going around. So evocation can be extremely dangerous if you cannot control yourself. And Jack could not control himself. Neither could Grady. You make a certain vow in the beginning of the OTO that you will not be affected by the drugs or drink or things like this. But Grady was an alcoholic, and he was affected, and it's no wonder that he went down the way he did. I think he was kept alive only so long as a new person came along who could do an excellent job of being at the head of the order. That's HB. I haven't seen anyone make the same kind of mistakes. But anyway, it is extremely dangerous to ignore the basic steps of control. And just now I was talking about controlling the body. And if you're a slave to alcohol, cigarettes, or maybe even coffee, be careful about that one. Drugs, you have to control this. We don't want slavery among Elamites. And what are you a slave to? You can be a slave to believing certain things that you read, and or somebody might tell you something that you don't think for yourself, you just accept it. That's a slavery type of attitude. And you have to learn to think for yourself. I'll tell you a little story about myself so that you know that I'm quite independent on this score. Grady was the head of the order for a while, you know. I put him there, actually. I invited him out here and paid for everything after that. So we got fighting because he wasn't doing things right, and I didn't approve of the alcohol. Nor of the attitudes that came from being an alcoholic. And if you read up on your psychology, you know what those are. So we parted, and Grady then did something to try and get me to obey him, because he was the caliph. And I said, and Rusty and I argue about this all the time. And Rusty would say, well, you should have respect for him because of his title. And I said, I don't respect anybody who is an alcoholic. I don't care what their title is. Now, I was thinking to myself, and it wasn't popular. And it's never popular sometimes when you think for yourself. And you don't follow the general, what you're told to do. You have to find out for yourself. And of course, if you happen to have dealings with our high muckamucks in the OTO, you decide for yourself that you can deal with certain persons, you can't with others. Well, then you figure out what to do about it, you see. And you have to just control yourself in such a way that you can control your own phenomena. You make every bit of phenomena that you suffer. So you part with somebody you love. What did you do? It's not the other person's fault. It might be 50-50, it might be 60-40, but you've got to take the burden on your own shoulders of whatever you did. You have to realize you did this. It's part of your life. You make your phenomenon. And no one else does it for you. Of course, you have to go through certain training when you're a child, and part of that phenomenon is made for you by childhood. But then you grow up and you say, well, my parents were right, or my parents were wrong, or I was lucky, or I was unlucky, or whatever it was. And then you make up your mind for yourself about the events you've gone through. But to tell the truth, when you were on the other side and were about to be born, you chose those parents yourself. If you have an advanced soul and you're interested in illumination, chances are very great you chose your own parents. Because why? Because you had to have certain lessons that carry on from life to life to life. And if you don't learn these lessons in this life, you can have them again next life until you learn. And sometimes, if your blessing is severe enough, you have it worse next time until the Holy Guardian Angel is dealing with you on that particular matter. So if you go through troubles, it's because it is your particular relationship to the highest in you, or the Holy Guardian Angel, however you want to phrase it. And the troubles are for you to solve. They are your lessons. You're here in life as in a school. So the school gives you certain things you have to learn, and you have to discipline your mind. Well, if you're going through college, of course, you've already learned a lot about disciplining the mental side of you. But a great many men have lived here. Most men don't know anything about disciplining their emotional life. Women know a lot about it. Because there's various levels, you see, on the physical level, for instance, men act in a positive fashion. You can see them building cities and roads and tearing them down and doing all this heavy physical labor. Then the next level up is emotional. And the woman can walk into a room and immediately know everything about the atmosphere. Intuition. And a man will say, what's the matter with that girl I'm going with? She's got the funniest ideas, but she has picked up something of the emotional life of the males that she knows. And male usually says, I don't understand all this. But she's positive on the emotional plane. And the male is negative there. So then you take the next step up, which is the mental plane. You can put this all in the tree of life if you like. And the male is positive there and has been for a very long time. We call that mental the sword. And it says in the Book of the Law, let the woman be girt with the sword before me. So we see in the past and today too, the majority of men are going into mental work. Doctors, lawyers, professors, and so on. And they think this is the end of it. And the woman has been negative on the mental plane in the past, but now she has to learn how to be positive on the mental plane. That's our job in dilemma as women. And if men refuse to learn how to understand the emotional plane, and the woman finally catches up with him on the mental plane, who do you think is going to rule the world? All right, now the top plane of all, of course, is the spiritual plane. And woman is positive there. And man is negative. And this is why in the past you've seen all of this worship of woman. Just look at the first chapter of the Book of the Law, which sort of encapsulates all of this. But a woman has a spirituality that he wants, needs. If she hasn't killed it out, meanwhile, with having to live through the eternal age, life to life, and getting pushed down the time. So if she is really functioning as a woman, she is positive on that plane. And if she is positive, then men usually come along and worship. What happens in the Mass? The woman is placed on the altar. She becomes the spokesperson for Nui. She doesn't say an awful lot. Some women don't understand their role in this. It's the highest role of all. And he worships her spirituality. And she should try to represent this if she can in her life to the male she's attached to. So, having gone off the subject on this thing, which is we were back, let's go back down to controlling the physical body. How many in this room take enough exercise? Thank you. How many in this room take good care? Let's put it the other way. How many in this room have given up junk food? People. Because junk food is not going to do you any good, as you know if you've studied the subject. I happen to be interested in health due to certain things happening in my horoscope, and I've studied it for 20, 25 years, something like this. And if you're going to be the kind of magician you hope to be, you have to have a healthy body. And if you join the College of Thelema, for instance, or the Temple of Thelema, we begin to give you some instructions on this, and then it's up to you after that. want to listen. And I could get hardly anywhere with some. So then I decided, well, I'll back off. And I'll just mention that you have to think about health in terms of what you put into your body. See, because you can put in things that are going to make you pretty sick, and you just, all your work stops right then. The body is the temple of the soul. It's necessary to control that body. If it wants cigarettes, and the cigarettes are preventing you from singing or whatever, you have to give up the cigarettes. I had another student, when I was giving these large seminars, she started to smoke. She was an extremely intelligent person and going very far with these studies. I attacked her all one of our 3-day seminars. As a result, 2 people gave up smoking. But she had to do it if she was going to go further, you see, and she had to learn that the body has to be controlled. You have to have self-discipline. If you don't have self-discipline, you must realize that you're going to stop yourself somewhere along the way. All right, now the next thing you need to control is emotional reactions, and this is really tough because emotional reactions are all tied in with a lot of other things and so on. And in the College of Thelema, we try to teach a certain amount of psychology. When you go along further in the College of Thelema, I get into reading things like the old psychology books of all kinds, and then if you have real difficult emotional problems, then hopefully come and talk to me about it. And let's see if we can iron it out. And I might give a few clues. And there are a few successes along this line. It takes worse hard work to control the emotional life. But let's say that you decided that, and you're young, let's say, and you decided that you're going to be interested in this life of achieving the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, and you have the highest ideals on this score, and a woman comes into your life, and you stop, and you support her, you support the children, you work hard, and all your ideals fly out the window because your emotional life has interfered. And of course, there are less extreme cases than that. But that's just a thing that happens. I've seen a lot of young men join the OTO. And they didn't understand about controlling their own emotions. And perhaps they quarreled with somebody in the OTO. And then they gave the whole thing up. Just because there was personality differences. Well, I've gone through a lot of personality crises with lots of people. Came out somehow in whole peace. I tell you, this is no fun, right? Yeah. But you do have to decide that you have one goal in life. That's what you want to do. You want to achieve the knowledge and conversation. You have one goal. And no other person in the world is going to stop you from that. You have to decide that. And you have to control your emotions to suit. Even if you have, let's say, a goal of a finite will, and let's go back to our violinist, and he decides that he loves a certain woman, and but that woman says, you can't be a violinist, you have to go and work and do something else, you're not earning enough money. And he wants to be a musician, he has to give the woman up. Because his will should mean more to him than any other person in the world. Now this is what the Book of the Law is telling us, actually, to really understand what it is you're reading. I really advocate that you memorize all 3 chapters in due time. In fact, in the College of Thelema, as part of the first course work, memorize chapter 1. And then in the second course, we memorize chapter 2. And then we memorize chapter 3. Well, if you get into the AA, you have to memorize all 2 whole books. memorizing is part of the curriculum, whether it's AA or COT or TOT. And sometimes if you're in the OTO and you're doing a mass, you have to memorize your part. So be warned, I like to memorize. Right. Now, disciplining the emotional body can be extremely difficult, but you have to keep in mind your one goal. The law tells us that the will is one. It's not a lot of whims, wishes, and wants. So how many of your whims, wishes, and wants can go on from day to day are interfering with what you really will, whether it's the finite will or the infinite will? So it's perhaps a whim to party till late at night, and then the next day you can't function at work. Which happens often when you're young. Or you can't understand what it was the teacher said in the college class today because you did the wrong thing last night. So you really have to be dedicated to what you want to do, whether it's the finite will or the infinite. Mostly, some people begin with the finite will, and then they learn how to make decisions eventually if they want to get where they want to go. And I don't think I have to say too much about mental discipline because I believe almost everyone here has been through a college course of some kind, or at least through high school. And so you learned mental discipline in your background. But you can go on, and I really think that you shouldn't stop with college courses, and I don't believe anyone in this room has stopped. You go on learning and learning and learning, and you don't stop learning all your life. You pick up new subject matter according to what your particular bent is, and pick up the right books to help you with it, and so on. So the mental discipline is usually under control, hopefully. All right, now, I had a question from someone about the difference between the AA, the OTO, College of Plymouth, and the Temple of Plymouth. And so I think I'm going to just switch to that after telling you how serious this all is. I sort of went by my notes and sort of didn't, as usual. All right, now I always say the OTO is wonderful to start with because you meet people with the same ideas in their heads, and you have a lot of interaction with other people. And of course, if you decide that your interaction isn't working with a certain lodge or camp or oasis or something, you go to another until you find something that you like. And the OTO doesn't object to that because birds of a feather will flock together. You know, Crowley recognized that, wrote about it. And the OTO is an outer order. It is political and social. It doesn't ask a lot of work from you unless you want to go on. The farther you go on, the more service you must give to other people. You cannot have a selfish attitude and decide that you can go on with this differently or whatever. You have to be certified helpful by other people observing what you do, you see, because you only get an invitation up there. Now, of course, the third degree, up to the third degree, is open to everyone because the Thelema needs to be spread around the world. And it really would be a panacea for ills of the world when we decide that we have to leave other people alone. Not only do we have to accomplish our own wills, but we have to stop interfering with others. Now, I'll tell you a little story here. You've probably heard about Carl Germer taking over the OTO head when Crowley died. And I went up to visit Carl one evening with my son. And we got to talk something about German history. And since he was a German and knew much more than me, he got a little bit angry and gave us a long lecture on German difficulties ever since Bismarck and so on. Fine. So at the end of his lecture, I said, what each country needs to learn to do is to allow the other countries to do their will. The lecture stopped right there. Carl was overwhelmed. He didn't think the law of Thelema applied to all kinds of countries. But it has to. If we're going to get rid of wars, we'll have to learn how to work things together in peace and allow other countries to have their own raw materials and not go in and grab them. And every country in the world, of course, is going to be upset by this new eon. I don't know of a single country that's going to be untouched by the change from the old eon to the new eon. Just watch. You think, well, the country's pretty peaceful and so on and so on. And then suddenly there's some kind of a revolution in it, or they get attacked by somebody else. So it will all... that's why we have turmoil. It's because we're changing from one old eon to a new one. And people don't want to change their minds. If they have a settled way of thinking, settled way of acting, this is good enough for me, they think. Of course, until the country that they have always hated comes in and shoots them up. And then they have to change. Now, humans won't change until they suffer. And if you have your own suffering individually, there's something that you have to work on and change. And this might be difficult because you're working against your horoscope or something like this, but you have to control, you have to know that horoscope and control what happens if you're going to be a good magician. Now, of course, you're called a magician sometimes. Most people don't act like one. So the OTO is wonderful for that reason. You learn about political action. You have to know how to interact with other people. You can't just draw yourself off into a cave and be all alone and achieve your spiritual enlightenment all by your little self. Because why? Because, as Crowley says, a pig for your trances. You have no assistance to the world afterwards. And the OTO is one way to give assistance if you have achieved certain levels of understanding. But remember always that it is an outside order and it doesn't ask you to do a lot of work. Unless, of course, you want to go into the higher grades. In some cases, people have given a lot of assistance to various lodges or camps or so on, and so then those in the higher grades say, oh, this person is really deserving, and they will go on serving other people. So therefore, they get invited to invitational grades. And this, of course, is one reason why we have very few people in arena, because there's not many people understand this idea of service to the human race. And the service is even more severe in the AA than it is in the OTO. You achieve a certain thing, let's say, you achieve the knowledge and conversation of Holy Guardian Angel in the AA. Then you have to help others. And you have to follow directions which come directly from the angel. And you have to give up your little self and learn how to live to be a channel for the highest. And of course, if you haven't gotten all this discipline done already, try to go quap. Go much farther, not at least with this life. Let's hope that you don't behave in such a way that you quap for several lives. But you do have to understand that you have lessons to learn. And they can be on these various levels that I was speaking about. And that you have to control your little self so that the angel can work with you. The Holy Guardian Angel will not indwell a body poorly prepared. And if you have no self-discipline, you're not going to get anywhere on this particular thing. Well, that's jumping right from the OTO to the AA. All right, when I first started this, I was 30 years of probationer in the AA because Jane Wolfe, there's a direct descent from Crowley to Jane Wolfe, and I was Jane Wolfe's student, so there's a direct line, you see. Okay, nothing would have happened except that I did some work. And halfway through, I achieved the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. At least it was given to me that way. And Carl Germer said that I hadn't achieved a certain grade, that I had achieved a certain grade, 5, 8, and 6 in AA, but I hadn't done some of that beginning work that Crowley set out for you. So I had a chance then to go back and to do the work that I'd missed in order to help others who were coming along. And the person who helped me decide that I'd done it was Jim Eshel. And he has now gotten as far as I have. And that's why he's written this mystical and magical system of the AA. And he's done excellent work on that. It's the kind of work I could never have been able to do. So, let's say that I was given a person who would help me achieve another step, going from the 5 equals 6 back and filling in. And Jim came along and helped me fill it in. He was the witness that I'd done so. And I was the witness, of course, that he had accomplished certain things. So in the AA, in this branch of the AA, the person does the assigned work that Crowley has given out, and we issue the paper when the work is done sufficiently well, and what Crowley expected. In other words, we follow everywhere possible the instructions that Crowley gave. Now, other people have achieved a scientific illuminism, if you want to call it that, and other methods, but that's okay. You could be a Hindu or a Buddhist or something like this and achieve the same thing. But it wouldn't be, you couldn't call yourself our branch of the AA unless you had the papers in your hand that proved that we had tested you and that you were actually passed the grade because you did the work. Okay, now a person might go into the AA thinking, oh my, how wonderful, it's very glamorous. So I'm a member of the AA, and everybody take notice, please. It's the attitude. And immediately ego steps in. And you take a step up the tree of life, you're acquainted with the tree, and you get to another grade of the AA, you get to another grade, and the ego gets bigger and bigger, all the way. No one escapes the ego problem. No one. Until, like Crowley, you are able to cross the abyss and everything is taken away. You give up everything. And then, that is only momentary. You've lost the ego for a short amount of time. Then you come back and you have to function again on this world. And so then we see the ego still working below the abyss. It is not allowed, let's say, above the abyss in this supernal triad. It doesn't belong there. And of course, there's a lot of funny things happening in AA. People say, well, I don't know a good line or something like this. I'll do all this work by myself. And then they say, well, I've done such and such and such and such, so I must be a certain grade. But maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Often they aren't. It's just that the ego says, oh my, how great I am, I've done such and such. And maybe they've missed something. Maybe they have missed a great deal of self-analysis in psychology. In fact, Lagarde used to say, don't take up all those studies until you have been through an analysis. Well, that's wonderful, and it's probably going to work fine for a lot of people. I never could afford it myself, so I had to analyze myself. And that's how come I was glad I could do it. But not everyone can, because, you have habits or things that that escape your notice. And it might be very deleterious to your work. Carl Germer said that I probably had achieved what I had because I had a pure aspiration. I had one goal, and that was to know the Holy Guardian Angel. And I had to do a lot of other things too. I had to raise a family, I had to go to college, and be an art teacher for 20 years, and all kinds of things like that on the outer world. But the angel helped me along the way. And I discovered early on that I would sign a person up for the AA, and then nothing happened. They disappeared. After maybe 4 or 5 experiences like this, I decided, these people don't have a background. How can they do what Crowley asked them to do in the AA? They don't know what they're doing. They're absolutely ignorant. They were even ignorant of some of the basic things of Thelema. So then I decided, okay, I've been a beginner first of all. There. I will work with people who want to begin. And so I formed the College of Thelema. And since I'd been through a college course myself, all the way I got an MA, I decided it would be fashioned in such a way that it could be someday an accredited college. Well, now Jim has incorporated us according to the laws of California, that we're an incorporated college now. And he does a lot of teaching down there. And I'm beginning to retire a little bit from some of it, except I will work with people who really want some help and are serious. And if you join the College of Thelema and want a one-to-one help, I'm usually available for everybody, unless you choose a time when somebody else is there. So anyway, I started the College of Thelema thinking, all right, these people need basic knowledge about themselves. Who are you? Do you really know? And so one of the things we do is we have them write an autobiography and explain how come they came to Thelema and what dreams or visions they had which were sent them this way, or what phenomena, which of course they haven't manufactured themselves, they don't realize it, but they did. And then they said, oh, well, maybe this is who I am, or at least they get a glimmer of who they are. And so then we have more college things like reading certain books and making reports and answering exams and learning the Kabbalah. And then I have each person work on their own telescope. And that's a dilly. They usually work on that last. I have had students turn in pages, 100 pages or more, on their horoscope. Now, since astrology is new to everybody, I have rarely met a person who knows anything about astrology when they begin in college. I just say, well, okay, so now we have talked about it, that you have a certain planet square another planet, and you have a certain planet in a certain house, and what's it doing to your life, and so on. And so I said, go to the books and find out, just write a paragraph, because there's plenty of material on this. And then you don't have to write the whole paragraph, because some of these paragraphs in the books can't attack everything that you are. They can, a book can only give you the aspect between two planets. They can't give you the aspects of four planets working together. Nothing can do that. So you just simply analyze first. That's the first step anyway. And someday we hope you can synthesize it and put it all together and realize this is what you are for this life. Certain things are good for you, and certain things have to be controlled, and certain events will make you closer to your true will. I had a lovely student who had the most difficult horoscope I've ever seen. But I thought intuitionally there was a great deal of spiritual potential in this person. So I advocated that she study art, because art was the Venus in her horoscope was the best situated in the whole thing. And that's what she's doing. And that's her best line of expression. Now sometimes a horoscope would be extremely difficult. Crowley's horoscope was a very difficult one too. And of course he made lots of enemies, deliberately. He was one of the most difficult persons to know and to live with I've ever heard of. So that at the end of his life, there were only two people who had stuck with him for years, and that was Jane Wolfe and Carl Gerber. Even they had their troubles. But Crowley took this terribly difficult horoscope, and he had, of course, had karma pushing him from time, because he'd been in this kind of work very many lives. And your horoscope may give you some good indications for this type of thing, for the spiritual indication, but also karma comes into it. You have to figure that you've been interested in this thing in the past. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, you've chosen your background from your parents, and they gave you certain lessons which you needed. And maybe they were tough, and maybe it takes you until you're over 30 before you get over some of the events. And in other words, you have to stop being a teenager and blaming your parents for everything. What happens is your own phenomenon. And your parents taught you some things that were very useful. Some things you didn't like, but it was your choice to go through this, so that we can refine your own nature. All right, let's get back to the College of Fun. I think I covered it, didn't I? Well, all right. I started the college, and Jim Eshelman came along, and about third time I picked him up from San Francisco International, 1 or 2 in the morning. It was cheaper to fly at night, you see. Well, okay, so we sat on my patio top. It was a great deal like the patio I have now. And it suddenly was told to me that Jim was my successor. And he has gone fast, very fast through all his work. And he's been very brilliant. So in due time, he decided that he wanted to start the Temple of Palima, because the College of Palima didn't have enough ritual. He's a ritualist, and I'm very important at it. You see, we each have our strengths and our weaknesses. So he began with the Temple of Palima, and I read every single thing that he read. He wrote everything. Every time something new came to him, I read the thing. And sometimes in in the work he was doing, I'd say, well, listen, can't you add something from the Book of Law or from the Holy Books and so on? He'd go back and rewrite them. And he based it, you see, on some of the work done in the Golden Dawn. And it has a structure somewhat similar to the Golden Dawn, but it's become purely polemic. Rather than old Eon Siren stuff, it is now new polemic. And the structure was, of course, is fine because even Crowley used it for some of his rituals. And of course, that was Crowley's background. And of course, one thing, if you're interested in these studies, it's very helpful to work through some of the Golden Dawn reading, or perhaps go through some of their work, and so on. Especially some of the mental work, like the Kabbalah and so on. So Jim took all those things that I missed from the first class, course one of College of Lima, and he constructed his Temple of Lima. Now, about half of the Temple of Lima people now are at large, which means that they don't have a chance to go to the rituals every week. Pardon me, twice a month. But they do have to go down to Southern California for initiations, next step to take. And they do have to pass exams and so on. And all the College of Lima Course 1 material has been added to the first 4 steps in the Temple of Lima. And Jim has added a lot more, but it's good background material. And it helps you to understand this awful world of ours, that you're in. And helps you to work with it. Because you get a broader background. Now, the College of Lima likes to work with each person on the level of finding out who you are. Jim has put that in too, and sometimes the problems come up with the Temple of Lima, and Jim and Korea do their best to help people work through it. Not everybody sticks, of course, because there's always personality difficulties. I don't care what kind of group you get into, you're going to have personality difficulties. And of course, if you were a good astrologer, you knew the horoscope of everyone in the room, you'd say, oh, well. But there's one thing I'd like to say, and very seriously say it, don't let any other person stop you from doing good studies. I don't care if you don't like somebody. And I've gone through quite a lot of stuff. Personality difficulties. I was always low man on in the first Proctor's house in Hollywood. And I learned to weather them and decide what I was to do what I wanted. And it was good learning for me. So don't give up the OTO because you don't like a certain lodge. Don't give up the College of Lima because you can't stand the people in it. And so on. This is your decision to go on with the work. And if another person throws you off, you aren't fit for this work. That's all there is to it. You just aren't fit for it. So quit. And no blame. As the Tao Te King says, no blame. You have to decide. This is hard work, all of this. You have to decide if this work is going to be for you. And if you really want to concentrate on it. And you have to decide it in spite of the fact that you have a job or you're going to college and you're doing all kinds of other things. So, how many people get up a half an hour early in order to meditate? Already you're learning something about self-discipline. this is what you're going to have to do if you're going to really succeed in these studies. You can't just say, well, this is fun. I'll play around with it a bit, and then decide you can't work at it, and go off and invoke some kind of entity from another plane and get into trouble, and then wiped out for this life or the next life, or God only knows how long. So, all right, you have to discipline yoga. Yoga is an excellent discipline. And you have to take care of your body. You have to take care of your emotional life. You have to take care of your mind. Which, of course, most of you do. That's the trouble. You're too intellectual. Yes, we've already gone up there with getting all that stuff. I've covered some of that now. Okay, now do you have a good question to ask me? You said you did.
Pretty much covered everything.
Well, we were talking about death. Yes. Yes, see, I'm looking forward to death, and people say, well, no, Phyllis, you can't die. I say, yes, I can.
You can die, just don't do it yet.
Well, I'm 77, and I'm proud of being so old.
But 99 is that.
Oh, not if I lose my mind, or if I can't work in the garden any longer, it wouldn't be better. Look at the law says that we shall know about death, and I did find out. In other words, I can remember my last death. Well, a certain event came along, and I remembered several lives, actually, in the past. And then eventually, I experienced what my last death was like. Now, of course, you have to pay attention to your dreams. You have to pay attention to your visions. And in that time when you are sort of in between sleep and waking, you notice strange things. You must listen to the unconscious, if you possibly can. And some of these messages come from past lives. You are what you are because you've done it. Life after life after life, you've done certain things. And so each star is different. And you have to know your own star nature, of course, eventually. Well, I had this experience that I remembered dying in my last life. I don't know who I was, I don't know what my name was, but I was an artist. And I can remember seeing the rafters of a garret in which I was living, and the bed in which I was lying was not clean. Nobody was taking care of me. I'd been there suffering for a long time, and there wasn't anybody around. And the suffering was so great, so horrible. Eventually I left my body, and I was asked to leave my body. The angel came for me, and I left my body, and I experienced the love of the angel. And there's nothing on this earth that is so beautiful as that, and nothing so intense. Now, various persons have experienced this sort of spiritual illumination and have tried to write poetry about it. Certainly, Crowley was one of the greatest to write some beautiful things about it in his holy books, 65, 70s. But you can't put it into words. It's worth working for. It's worth all the trouble you might go through in trying to display yourself. It's worth all the trouble that you had to control. All the phenomena that you brought upon yourself, and whether you want it or don't want it, you have to learn how to control. It's worth all that. It's a refinement of all that you are to the best that you can be. And once you know that love, you get the guidance all the rest of your life. So work hard. a spirit coming wait on you. You have to be self-sufficient. Okay, now, I think I still have some time, so I want, before we read the second chapter of the book of law, if my clock hasn't stopped, it is 11 o'clock. I've been in the OTO now, see, about 55 years, I think it is. I joined a year before Brittany did. So I've been in it longer than anyone alive. Why my holy guardian angel spared me until now. Anyhow.
We're here.
Yeah, we're here.
We're talking for so long. You have a lot more.
Yes. Now, for this afternoon, I wanted to start the talk off with something about love, because we say love is the law, love and the will. And again, there are nuances in this sentence which sometimes you don't catch on to. In our modern day and age, where we have things hitting us all the time about sex. And I want to point out to you that love does not always include sex. For instance, you might love your job. You might love your children. You might love your friends. You might love your parents. You might love something you're doing. You might love the earth. You might love the work you do, you might love somebody's paintings or whatever. You can't have sex with all that, but it's still love. So therefore, we have to get rid of the idea that love always includes sex. It doesn't. And when Nui says, always unto me, she means that you should be living a life full of love. And often I can say, when you're working at something, you don't love what you're doing, you're in the wrong area. It should change until you find something that you love to do. Now, persons team up with each other because they fall in love. And sometimes it's not a very pure love, sometimes it's just sex. And of course that is not likely to happen to last very long. But then sometimes some type of love comes to persons who team up with each other. And maybe you don't stay with the same partner forever. Sometimes people do, sometimes they don't. And in our modern day and age, they often change partners quite rapidly. I'm one of them. And all of this is training. I can tell you from experience that the love of the Holy Guardian Angel is greater than anything you will know on this earth. But you fall in love because you have an idea in your head of the perfection of your Holy Guardian Angel. Now, it may not have filtered through very easily. Men usually fall in love with somebody who represents their anima, if you're into Jungian psychology. And the anima represents the ideal they have for the woman. And the women will fall in love with the knight in shining armor called the animus. And these are intermediate steps to knowing the love of the Holy Guardian Angel. It's not the whole story, you see. But you do this because you have to learn what love is like. You could not stand the love of the angel if you had not experienced love. It would simply burn you up, blow you away. And so every time you love, it's sacred. It is, you are in one step or another, you are perhaps at the stage where you love the perfection of your own higher self. Or perhaps the angel has made itself known in such a way. But usually the anima or the animus is the intermediate step. So you lose a partner, and you go into some kind of a tailspin. But that's not the end of anything. You love again, and maybe the next love is a little bit more refined because you learn something. Hopefully you learn something. Some people repeat the same kinds of partnering over and over again because they haven't learned some kinds of lessons. So if you can discover that you're repeating the same idea, you always, let's say, you always marry an alcoholic, or you always marry a woman who takes advantage of you, or whatever it is, or somebody who bosses you around. There's a lesson you have to learn because you've repeated the same pattern over again. And you should learn it so that you can go on to the next step. Now, when people are partnered, living the law of Thelema, do what thou wilt, becomes extremely difficult. Because when you fall in love, you are projecting your own perfections, what your idea of perfection is, on the other person. And that person is not what you think they are. You have not learned to leave them to be themselves. You think that they should be so and so perfect because it's your perfection. And sooner or later you discover, they're doing things I wouldn't do, and you begin to quarrel. You have to learn in very close quarters to let the other person go their way. And this is difficult because we project all the time and every day. And you're all projecting right now, and I'm sorry, I'm the target for some of you. And if I obviously know I'm a target, I'll do something to make you stop it, for help, hopefully. Your own perfection, you should worship your own star nature. That's what you worship, not anybody else. And sometimes people get into the occult field because they think, well, Crowley was great, you know. So we stand at the stage door and yay, yay, yay for the latest pop star. Oh, wonderful, I'll do everything he says. Not thinking of yourself, are you? Becoming sheep. Well, that's not exactly Thelemic thinking. So Crowley might write something, let's say, I won't attack the holy books because you can't attack those. But anyway, he might write something in something else that is the man Crowley. And so you have to say, well, that's the man Crowley, and I'll think about that, and you don't accept everything. That means you have to be informed. And I can tell you I went through a period of time when I simply got angry at the way Crowley wrote about women. And I thought, there's got to be something better than this. And I wouldn't read him for 5 years. You have to back off, you know. So I read other authors, especially women authors. And look, for instance, these books here. I wanted to bring those up and I'm digressing again, folks. But this Barbara Brennan book, Light Emerging, well, I read it through, and she says the same things that you could say, well, that's what Nuit says. And she sees auras clear into the, see what people do to each other with their auras, so on. And she sees auras with all 7 layers. And that corresponds to the 7 steps that you can find on the Tree of Life if you look at just the spheres. And it's worth picking this up because of the fact that she is a Thelemite, but she's never read the Book of the Law. And as you read it, you say, oh, okay, so I know what that is in the Book of the Law. Here you are as a star nature, for instance. We're all stars together. Only when you're in the human body and you have a certain difficulty with your character because you have to work with the astrology you were born with and background and the karma and whatnot, you lose sight of what the star nature is, and you have to begin to tear away all of these veils that you're carrying around with you, and the thicker the veil, the worse you are. In fact, it is possible to push away the holy guardian angel from your life. And all you have to do is look at people who are habitual criminals. So what happens to such a star? They don't quit it. They don't listen to the lessons coming from their higher self. Eventually they can disintegrate, just like stars do in the sky. Blow up, you know. But if you're a Thelemite, what you want to do is make your own star nature bigger and bigger and bigger because of your experience. And love is part of that experience. So every time you love, you are learning how to relate to the Holy Guardian Angel. Now, Matt, here's some interesting questions. Yes, there have been some modern discoveries made. Has anyone here read Life by Moody? You see, what happens is that these people died in the non-plastic and modern medicine brought them back after they were dead. And those 2 minutes when they were dead, this was terribly insane. They would go down through a corridor or a dark area, and at the end of it, they into a beam of light. The Holy Guardian Angel was there to instruct them. And since they were going to come back because of modern medicine, that changed their whole life. They came back with an idea of the kind of work they should do, and they stopped fussing about what was happening to them previously, and settled down to do their real, honest-to-God work. I don't advise you to go out and get into automobile accidents. You can experience this. You might not come back. But this is a discovery of modern medicine. And that's why Moody titled his book that life does exist after life. And of course, if you have memories of past incarnations, you know it. You know you'll be here more than once, and each time you have something to learn, and the lessons get more and more refined until you're ready for really great experiences. Yes, you meet the being of light, and which we call the Holy Guardian Angel, right at the end. And as I explained to you about my previous death, my last death, that's exactly what happened. And there's no pain on the other side, no work, just pure love. Some people have to sleep for a while because this life is rough. And then, according to some psychic investigations, there is regular lesson types of things on the other side, like astral hospitals and whatnot, to take care of people who are going the wrong way. Another book, if you can stomach it, very big, is called Oahspe. And that was written with automatic writing. A certain dentist in the late 1800s was told to give away his dental services for about 10 years to refine himself, and then he would be helped to write a book. And he knew nothing about typing, and typewriters were newer at that time anyway. However, he'd get up at 5 in the morning, according to instructions, and sit down and write these messages coming from angelic beings on the other side. Well, you know these exist now because you read Crowley's account in in his vision in the voice. So it's obvious that this is the case. Well, anyway, this is a great big thick book which explains the history of mankind and through the various cycles as they came through thousands and thousands of years to inhabit this earth. And of course, the Hindus have said for a very long time that we're at the bottom of the cycles. We're in the Kali Yuga. And we have become far too commercial and too wrapped up in the body, things like this. And you just watch TV, my God, it makes you sick to the stomach. And sex and violence, whatnot. And therefore, we now have to work our way out of this. And this is how come Robert Wheat says, I'm the God of war and vengeance. Because if you become so materialistic as all that, you have no more spiritual life left. If the gods are going to be worried about you, or your holy guardian angels are going to be worried about you, you're going to be hit until you get out of it. And all you have to do is look around the world and you see this thing working. And that's, he is a God of war and vengeance. And it talks about torture and things like this, but that doesn't mean we do it. It's been done. Stalin, Hitler, South America, it's Near East, been done all over the world until people have suffered enough that they will accept that they should have a spiritual life, and they won't accept this if they're too set in their ways. They have to be shaken up. Mankind is so situated they won't learn unless they have sorrows and troubles. Have you ever known a really settled, rich person that didn't have to worry about a thing, that had anything in their heads at all? If we don't make a struggle, if we don't have to struggle for something, why then we don't learn. So, now then, was there another question? So I can get off the subject a lot more. And I'm going to run out of steam if you don't ask me questions. Yes.
I've got a question for you. It's kind of like there's a lot to it. Let me just get it out and get the general idea of what I want to ask. And basically, let me start with, you went back to the idea, going back to something you were saying earlier about Grady and his drinking, and being in control of the body, and purifying the body, if you want to put it that way, making sure you eat healthy foods and building up the body. Now both Grady, with his alcohol, and then Crowley with his heroin addiction. What is your opinion of other AA branches that may not emphasize that so much, or as evidenced by Grady and Crowley?
Don't ask me an opinion about any other AA branches. They're not my business.
Okay.
However, I will give you an opinion about Crowley. He did not become an addict when he started. He strengthened his body to begin with. He was he had weaknesses as a child. And he deliberately took up rock climbing and mountain climbing in order to strengthen himself. And he deliberately took up asana and pranayama. Now, he ended up with a difficulty with his lungs later. I often think to myself, well, he was doing pranayama in polluted air in London and taking in too much of that pollution. And did that cause the asthma? Or was he allergic to something, born allergic to something or other, and that could have caused the asthma? And see, in those days they wouldn't know. So when he went to North Africa after Cheflu, the doctor, he had terrible asthmatic attacks all his life. And the doctor in North Africa put him on heroin to relieve it. And then he tried to get himself off of it. A horrible struggle and thought he'd won the battle. But the asthma came back, and they didn't have good asthma medicine in those days. All they could think of was something that was like heroin, for instance. In other words, medicine wasn't too well developed, and they didn't know much about allergies. So he became addicted to the heroin, and it was a medical problem. But he had already accomplished the most. By 1910, 1912, he had written the holy books and received the book of the law, and he was in healthy condition when that happened. Now, yes, he did experiment with drugs, and it says in the book of the law, drink wine and take wine and strange drugs, and they shall not harm you. Well, it also says to worship me. So people go and say, well, okay, so Crowley was a heroin addict, so I guess it's all right, I'll take heroin, and they get hooked. And they can't do anything further with their spiritual development in this life because they can't control it. And they forget to worship me. What is an act of worship? Now this may be different for every person. Huxley wrote a book called The Island. And that it's just a novel, but it tells you how these young people on this island take a certain drink, a soma, or whatever you want to call it, in a group, and then they have a group leader who talks to them about the high spirituality of the experience. And nobody becomes addicted because they only do this maybe once a year. So you have to do this under will. If you do take something, you have to be extremely careful that it doesn't take you. Do you become a slave to it, or are you going to control it? You have to control yourself. Now, Kay, now does that settle that question, or do you have something further to go on with?
No, I think that answers it quite adequately. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Phil, so what's the nature of the HGA? And what kind of being is it?
A being of light.
Is it external to yourself? Is it part of yourself? Is it subjective?
Well, you know, Carl Germer and Crowley struggled with that question for years and years. And I printed in the IPC some of Carl's opinions about it. And Crowley says that Aiwass, who dictated the Book of the Law, he finally discovered that perhaps this was his own holy guardian angel.
Yeah.
Well, they each came up with the opinion that the holy guardian angel was separate. Now, you do have a higher self. You have a part of you that wants to attain to the highest, and so that you can be the best that's possible for you. And you get this guidance from the other side as long as you don't turn it away. Well, okay, so how do you begin to listen to the guidance from the other side? Intuition. That's the first step. Intuition. And for instance, if you're driving along the freeway, your intuition will say that guy was going to move into your lane. You know, that's why I prefer to drive, is because if I'm in an airplane, my intuition is wiped out. Somebody else is doing all the driving. But you listen. You begin to listen to your intuition in the most simple ways, and let it grow. And be careful that the ego doesn't tell you instead of the intuition. Okay? Now then, once the intuition gets started, and you have high aspirations, then you take your path of the way you think is best for you. And if it isn't the best, then you change until you find what fits. We were talking about various OTO things and various things that are available to you in this area and down in Los Angeles, for instance. You might discover that you like the work of the College of Thelema, okay, and maybe you'd rather do just OTO work, that's fine too, and maybe TOT, College of Thelema, AA and OTO is fine for some people, all four, and that's a big load. So you just simply decide, and if you discover that you can't work with a certain group, well then move away. You've got lots of choices around here until you find something that will really help you. Now, of course, sometimes it's a help if you're fighting with somebody, because then you have to come up against some part of your nature that wants to do this kind of a fight. And of course, the best thing to do is begin to study yourself. Know yourself. That's what we emphasize in the College of Tolima Contemplative. Know yourself, and we try to help you to get there, so you begin to learn what that's all about. Okay, now, yes.
How do you tell the difference? Well, what's a good way to make sure that you're listening to your intuition and not to your ego?
If it's just ego, life will come down along and boom, and give you a big whop. Because the ego always, you have to face it all the way up the tree of life. And it's always there. It's just like we're always thinking the other person should act like we do. We're always projecting. Always. And if you have to learn to accept other people for who they are and give tolerance because, oh, well, that person can't help it. They've got that kind of a horoscope or they're like that. And they don't have to behave like me. And that's very difficult work if you're in the same house with another person.
Or if you're a Leo.
Right. If you
I'll second that.
right. If you're naturally a leader, like most air signs are, Aries and Leo and Sagittarius. Not air sign. I'm fire signs. I'm sorry. So you see, I'm running out of steam. Ask me another question. I'll see if I can.
I have a question.
Yes.
How did you work with your own autobiography, or do you ever recommend it after that? You were saying at one point starting writing your own autobiography to see your patterns in life.
Yes.
What did you do with it? How did you do it?
Well, you see, I took an English class in college, and I always got A for and she had us write certain types of things, journals and whatnot. I didn't sit down and write a formal autobiography like I asked you to do in the College of Tolima, but my teaching minor was English. So if I get work in that's misspelled, you get it back spelled correctly.
Spell check.
Yeah. Now you have computers to help you with this.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, yes.
You have a comment that Crowley puts on the Book of the Law, the study of this book is fulfilled in me, etc.
Right.
Well, why is it that we spend so much time studying it? I mean, isn't
All right, I'll tell you how that happened. You heard about Norman Mudd. OPV was his initials. In 1925, Crowley, Norman Mudd, and Leah Hersig, by that time Norman and Leah were lovers. In fact, Leah was pregnant with Norman's baby. They all went to Germany to meet with the German adepts. And some of those people they met with Karl Germer and a few others, Tranker and so on, you've heard their names and so on. And Norman Mudd was so inspired by this meeting that after Crowley and Leah, Leo stayed with Martha Kunzel until the baby was born, and Crowley left and went back, I guess, to North Africa or something. Norman Mudd sat down and wrote what his interpretation of the Book of the Law. And it was pages and pages. And he sent it to Crowley, and Crowley said, "This is pure trash." So then Norman's ego was so hurt by such treatment that he pulled out of all study of the occult from then on. He wasn't having anything to do with Crowley. And he wasn't the only one who wouldn't have anything to do with Crowley after a little bit. So he wrote a letter to Jane Wolfe, and I think I printed that he wasn't doing anything any further. But eventually he took a room in a certain Irish town, and he loaded his pockets with stones or whatever was heavy, and walked out into the water and drowned himself. And when Crowley heard that, he was horribly hurt, so terribly hurt. He sat down and wrote that comment right away. The study of this book is forbidden. Okay, so something's forbidden, you're going to study it, aren't you? And so we're not supposed to talk about it among each, and we're supposed to each make our own interpretation. And yet Crowley made some interpretations for us. And meanwhile, he didn't tackle everything that was in that book of the law. So once in a while, a person gets an idea. I don't mind writing about what I've discovered. For instance, let her work the work of wickedness. W. What's W in 6? 666. What does 666 refer to? Yes, to Tereth the sun. So that means that the women too are to attain to Tereth. And of course I had to dig that out after years and years of. And she isn't only going to be girt with a sword, but she's going to have the same amount of illumination as any man can have. And the paternal age is over, kids. All right, now any more questions? Yes.
Is there a difference between will and instinct?
Yes,
Such
indeed.
as like an instinct to eat and live?
Yeah, there is a good deal of difference. The will of the animal in you, to eat to live, for instance, and to reproduce your species and whatnot, is a lower form of, and we call it instinct because it belongs to the sphere of Yesod, which has the autonomic functioning of all that humankind has built up ever since we've evolved from lower earth, or lower forms of life. So that instinct drives us. And we behave like an ape every once in a while, we've never lost it, really. But you have to transcend the ape in you. And some instincts might lead you the wrong way. You have to discover what they happen to be, whether they're useful to you or not. Yes, it's useful to eat, but eat what? It's not just a matter of filling the stomach any longer. It's something that's going to help you with your true will. You have to decide that for yourself. So you see, the instinct says, yes, you have to eat. But another section of you says, well, I'm going to eat anything I please. And that may be blocking what you want to do with your life. Now then, will then takes over, you see, as soon as the person gets beyond Yesod and begins to function in the spheres of Hod and Netzach. I hope I'm not over anybody's head by talking about the tree of life. Hod, of course, is the intellect, and Netzach is love, the sphere of Venus. And so sometimes people can operate out of both of those, and sometimes with only one, and we have to balance them, both of them. So you have to learn how to love, and you have to learn how to use your head. That's what those two spheres mean. And you see, the will has to rule the instincts. Okay, give me some more questions.
I have a question for you regarding, working with entities on the other side. Now, I understand the idea of building a broad base, the pyramid, instead of like building a tower that's going to get knocked over with the first psychic wind, as you put it. What then would be the purpose of working with any entity from the other side, even after you have built up your tower, or your pyramid, I mean?
There's only one entity you want to work with, and that's the Holy Guardian Angel. As I pointed out earlier, Crowley himself says in Magic and Theory and Practice that any work that you're doing that is magical work, that is not oriented towards achieving the knowledge and conversation is black magic. You don't want to, you leave those entities alone. You're a Thelemite. You wouldn't interfere with your fellow Thelemites, so why would you interfere with other entities on the other side? I don't know if you were here when I gave you that horror story about somebody who did.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
right.
was just wondering if, even after you had reached that point of gaining the knowledge and conversation, if there was any purpose in...
Well, it might depend. You follow the directions of the angel.
And then it's up to the angel.
Yes,
from then.
it's up to
Okay.
the angel then to make things turn out correctly. And of course, Crowley writes right out that it's up to us to contact entities on the other side. But my God, you take that literally. Yes. And I don't think he realized how dangerous it was. It wasn't dangerous for him because he had the knowledge and conversation early on. Yes.
Wasn't the Marin operation supposed to involve contacting those entities after
Yeah.
chief? I mean, it's like almost like kind of a requirement.
Yes, I'll tell you what that really means. You get the first contact with the angel, and the ego is still extremely strong. It's only to Tereth. And the ego goes on being strong, clear through until you cross the abyss to the next one. And the farther you go, the more strong the ego is. So the Abrahamic demons are the demons inside you. You have to face them one by one and conquer them. And that happens after the first experience. That's what that really means. And of course, you know, you've read Crowley's account while he was in Boleskine, and he called up all these entities, and they did strange things to people, and made the dogs howl, and the gardener go mad, and doors open and close. Don't try it. He could do that because he was already, you see, many lives. In the past, he had worked with these things. But I wouldn't recommend it for anybody else. We're not as strong as he is. We don't have the same karma. We were not Elpis Levi in our past lives.
My experience with most people who play with entities is such that they are really falling into ego 100%. And so, you know, if you want to make an entity your slave, then it has power over you.
That's right.
Forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like,
You're absolutely correct.
you might learn something, but if you don't,
Yeah. Well, you could wreck a few lives.
besides your own.
Well, not only other people's lives, but your
Several
future
of them,
lives.
yeah.
You have to make up for every mistake you make. You have to learn from it and correct it if it's too bad a mistake, one time or another. Life is extremely well balanced. You know, the Book of the Law is A-L, Aleph Lamed. So Aleph is the beginning, if you know your tarot, of the fool who comes in and goes through all of these experiences, and it is also the card which represents the highest illumination a person can achieve and still have a mind, and still be on earth. And we all carry this beginning of the fool within us, and then we have Lamed, and everything has to be balanced, and that's karma. And if you do something bad to somebody else, you can expect repercussions on you. Now, any more questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
A lot of people, you know, especially generals or anyone, actually anybody could be asking us in school, well, it's a religion, and we call it, you know, it's a method of the aim of religion, method of science.
Yes.
Would you elaborate on when people would say, is this your religion, how would you respond?
I'd say, if I was talking to a Christian, I'd say yes.
What was the question?
Yes.
I can't hear the question.
Oh, you couldn't hear the question?
What should you say if somebody says, is thelema a religion?
And she always replies, the method of science, the aim of religion, which is true. We are interested in religious life and illumination. And a lot of people in this century are interested. And Blavatsky actually said 100 years ago, she said in the late 1800s, that it would take 100 years and there would be a great explosion of interest in occult subject matter. People would turn around from materialism into something better. And that's happening all over the world. Okay, some more questions. Yes?
What do you think of the quality of a lot of the occult material that's coming out these days, though? I mean, there's...
Oh, well, I think quality depends on the eye of the observer. For instance, some people like pornography. I don't think much about the eye of the observer in that case. Because it's the lowest form of sex you can imagine. And it takes advantage of other people. Innocent people. Like, for instance, children and women or something. So it's really very low. And actually the sex instinct, it should be transformed into a higher form. And that's why the wheat is always talking about love. It's not just sex. It has to be sex with love. And if it isn't sex with love, you get the direful judgments of Ra Hurkhuit. Well, who is Ra Hurkhuit? A representative of your own holy guardian angel. So if you are not using this basic instinct for the highest purposes, the holy guardian angel will come along and swat you until you learn. And you go from woman to woman, wonder why in the world women don't love you. Well, you've gone too low. And I have no use for any man who will hit a woman, really. You know, all this stuff that's surfacing out and taking advantage of little children. Well, those people are really saying no to injustice. They're killing themselves, actually. They not only harm the innocent, they harm themselves.
You've mentioned before about the people who abuse children or use sex in the wrong way. Do you think to an extent that could be a result of the repression of their freedom and not really knowing exactly where else to take it?
Exactly. There are a lot of things happening that cause that psychologically. The person who abuses has often been abused in his own childhood. And usually, the majority of people who abuse others men. And prisons get full of men much easier than they get filled with women. The women are supposed to take care of other persons and to nurture them. That's built into their nature because they bring children to the world and nurture them. And provide they're really being a woman, they do this. Of course, there are exceptions, and we always read in the newspaper about the exceptions, but those are few. That's not the man's work, actually, to nurture. He has to learn how to do so. And you find that there's some examples of men who will take care of his children while it works. Okay, he's learning how to become positive on the emotional plane. And it's a good work for him, see, because he's so negative on the emotional plane if he was male. That doesn't mean that in every lifetime he's male, he could be male or female. America has been built on the idea of freedom. Our founding fathers, many of them, you know, and just look at the dollar bill that comes on the pyramid. And so yes, and it says McLeod will give you a war engine, but you will smite the peoples, and I shall stand before you. Who do you think is the war engine? I would. You've already got the idea. Now think about it. Think how many wars we have to be in order for him to submit countries. Think about it. We had set aside and think about it. So part of TV's stuff is violent, which is that we can fight against our people. Instead of using it underwood, great freedom where freedom's needed. We enslave our people to their islands, which is different. Okay, let's just
What do you think about serious alien, so forth? Robert
I
Anton.
hope you're doing it.
No, not exactly.
I don't think anything about it because there's a lot of crazy talk that I just going around. And I'm getting crazy. is a concept which nobody understands because it belongs above the abyss. It belongs to God. And then we have the idea of Scarlet Woman. People go around thinking, the women like to go around thinking, well, I'm a Scarlet Woman. I always like saying, oh, you police mistress. Yes.
Speaking of confusion, she went out, several women have put forth one to be the Carter Reed speech, or she says she gathered this assortment spices. It's sexist because it's talking about women and possessions or something like that.
Well, it's like women were spiritually positive.
Yeah.
And so if the male's delivered